Hello, Miss Stokes here, and in today's lesson we're going to learn about different watercolour techniques and the colours that are within our watercolour sets. You will need your watercolour set and brush, a water pot, some tissue to be able to clean your brush, a page of your sketchbook and a pen. Firstly, we're going to create some little swatches of colour, and we're going to do this by creating a fade from the most vibrant colour we can create to the lightest colour by adding water to kind of create a gradient of colour. In your watercolour set, you have two of each of the main colours. So we have two yellows, we have a cool and a warm yellows. We have lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. Then we have two reds, one is cadmium red, the more orangey colour, and then we have the Algerian crimson, which is a lot pinkier. Then we have ultramarine blue, my favourite colour, which is kind of the cooler blue. And then we have the intense blue, which is much more greeny blue. Then we have sap green, which is kind of really green grass green. And then we have viridian hue, the other green, which is very kind of a bluey green. Then we have three earth colours. We have yellow ochre, burnt sienna and burnt umber, which are kind of a really good set of browns and really good for landscape painting, which we're going to do. And then we have a white, which mine's a little bit off-white, but it's because I've been mixing with it. Your watercolour sets don't contain black, so we need to mix some kind of nearly black colours. You've done this in lesson by mixing blue and brown together. So here I'm going to show you how my two different blues mixed with burnt umber create two very different kind of black colours. So firstly I'll mix ultramarine blue with burnt umber, which gives me a very kind of true black kind of colour. It's a bit bluey looking, but it is better than when I use the intense blue with the burnt umber, which creates a more greeny black, which I think this is because the intense blue is a lot more greeny blue rather than the ultramarine, which is kind of very cold, and it creates a really lovely black like you can see here. And then underneath I've done the one which created with intense blue, which is a lot greenier. And then I just mix a little different variation, a different proportion of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. We also don't have purples in our watercolour set, so I'm going to do the same again with our two reds, and I'm also going to do it with our two different coloured blues. What I found here is the cadmium red did not work very well, and it kind of created me some like browny colours, but the Algerian crimson created some fantastic purples because it was a lot more pinky red, and it creates two different coloured purples with the ultramarine and the intense blue. So have a go at trying that. The next thing I'd like you to do is to test different ways of handling your watercolour. Firstly, I created a flat wash of colour, making sure I had an even consistency of pigment in a little square. Then I did a little fade where I kind of add lots of pigment at the beginning, and then I use the water to kind of fade it out gradually. Then I do a square of just water first, and then add little droplets of pigment which then bleed beautifully into the area where I've applied water. Then I'm going to test wet on dry. So firstly I need to paint a square and leave it to dry. The next one is using a tissue to remove paint. So I create an area of colour, and then I use a tissue to kind of remove lovely marks, which kind of is a little bit like clouds. Then I use my paintbrush to create fine marks. Think about how much paint you have on your paintbrush. Then I do some little masking tape to kind of block areas out. And then the final one is an interesting one where I apply an area of colour and then use salt, and then the salt absorbs kind of the pigment and it draws it in and creates this lovely texture. Finally, I'm going to paint back on top of my wet on dry and see how applying colour over the top it can change. And then I remove my masking tape, which kind of creates two lovely clear marks. And then I just write down underneath what I did so I remember. So hopefully the things that we've been through today are helpful for you to understand how to use your watercolour set. So you have a good understanding of the colours you have to use, you understand how to make black and purple, and you've tested different watercolour techniques. Next lesson, you'll be able to apply your watercolour knowledge in creating a little copy of the artist's works Turner using his watercolour landscapes for inspiration.